Okay, we are live in the very official podcast. So this is going to be quite cool because like, I know you and I have talked about like coaching a little bit every now and then, but we've not really had like a bit more of like a deep dive. And I know you've kind of gone through like initially starting out in bodybuilding, like coaching for 10 years now, is it roughly?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just over 10 years now, I
Like
think.
actual like decent amount of time for a coach, not 2 years being online, which is what we're seeing a lot of nowadays. So like I know for you, was bodybuilding like the original thing that you kind of got into within the gym?
So I used to play a lot of sport when I was younger. I was big into football, that was kind of my main sport, but then I also did every other sport under the sun in secondary school. And I got really into the gym whilst I was playing sport. So I think I first started going to the gym when I was about 15 with my mum. And then that was at the time when I was that young that I couldn't get my own gym membership. So I had to like go with my mum. And then as soon as I could get my own gym membership, I went and I started going to the classes, got really into spin classes, was doing that alongside sports and stuff. And then in women's football, as you'll know, it's very competitive, like getting into things at a high level. And also when you hit the age of like, I think it was 18 and 20, it kind of, when you're in amateur football, not professional, you just go into then women's open. So and it's that stage where everyone's going off to uni and stuff. So I loved my amateur football team, like the girls, we were all really good friends. And that was the main reason I played with that team. So when everyone went off to uni and that team kind of like separated, I wasn't really bothered about going into women's football. I just kind of carried on with the gym.
Yeah.
So carried on going to the gym, got really into spin classes and stuff. And I ended up starting as a personal trainer when I was about 18, I think I was.
All right. Okay.
18, 19 at Pure Gym because I was really into the spin classes, trained at the gym all the time, was friends with all the PTs. The manager ended up saying to me, if you ever want a job, you've got one. And I was initially going to go to uni to do sport and exercise science, had an unconditional offer, but I ended up turning it down because I was like, I actually want to be a PT.
Yeah.
So started working at Pure Gym, and whilst I was training and I stopped doing football, I got into more weight training, started developing muscle tissue. And one of the other PTs said to me, "Oh, have you ever thought about competing in bodybuilding? Like you probably do quite well." So I was like, "No, but I'll give it a shot. Like I'll try it." And I kind of
Like,
fell into
yeah.
bodybuilding. So it was never something that I was obsessed with, and I was like, "Oh, I really want to be a professional bodybuilder." At the start, anyway. I just kind of fell into it and did it for fun. And then my second show, I think that's the one where I won my first show, realized I had potential, and that's when it kind of got more serious. And I started to think, oh, like I've actually got potential in this sport. And it became a little bit more all-consuming, I guess. And my training kind of started to revolve around bodybuilding and nothing else.
Yeah. It's really funny how like the 2014, 2015, 2016 was the era of if you had like a decent rig, everyone was just like, "Oh, have you thought about competing?" Because not that there was
Literally.
nothing else you could do, but it was almost like the this is the thing that you do when you've got that good physique. Whereas
Yeah.
now it's like there's so many more options where it's like you obviously can do that, but like even like photo shoots becoming more popular nowadays than just compared to like going to a very high level of like a condition. So it's fun. Like, the same thing happened with me where everyone goes, "Oh, you've dieting a couple of times, you look good. Do you want to compete?" And I was the opposite. I just went, "I've got zero interest in this. Like, I'm not giving up food that much. There's no way in hell."
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did you compete for roughly? It was a couple of years.
It was 5 years, I
A decent
think.
amount of time then.
Yeah, I did a 2016 season, 17, 18 was an off season, and then I did 19 and 20. So yeah, 5 years.
Okay, decent.
My last season was actually 2020 in COVID. So we were wearing masks on stage and everything. And that was the year that I was chasing my pro card and everything started to get like very extreme, so to speak.
Yeah. So what was the, because this is, I'm always curious about this because obviously we're now in an age where, like, I've said like performance goals are like just as popular as bodybuilding and physique goals. What was like the catalyst where you just went, I am not picking up a bikini again unless it's like holiday, like I'm done with this. Was there kind of like a defining moment, or did you, it was like gradually just kind of fell out of love with it, and like maybe COVID had a bit of a better part as
Yeah,
well.
it was kind of a mixture of things. So every time, obviously when I first got into competing, I was 19. So I was young when I first started my first prep. And I was very naive to the negative consequences of competing. So although I knew that losing my period, for example, was not a good thing, I wasn't aware of how consequential that was. So the further I got into my competitive career, the older I got, the more aware, the more educated I became, the more aware I was of actually this could have a negative impact on my health, not just now, but over the long term as well. So that gradually over the 5 years became a more prevalent thought in my mind that like, okay, I understand now how much this could harm my health. It's not just dieting and getting lean and
Yeah,
like doing a fun sport
yeah,
for for the fun of it and to have a goal. It could actually seriously harm my health. So that was always a niggling thought in the back of my head. And the more time went on, the more all consumed I became by the sport. And so there was that element of it as well. And I saw a shift in my enjoyment of it as that happened. So at the start, when it was more of something that I was doing just as the next goal and it was a new little fun thing to dive into, I had a really good relationship with it and it wasn't so serious. And it was more something that I guess added to my life rather than something my life revolved around. But the more the years went on, and the more I guess the bigger my goals got in the sport, the more extreme my actions had to become, and therefore the more extreme the consequences. And then when it became more consuming and I couldn't even go out for a meal with my friends and family without sitting there with a Diet Coke or prepping my food and taking it with
yeah,
me, that's where I got to the point, I think, in 2020 where I stopped enjoying stepping on stage and I was like, actually, what am I doing this for? I'm not really enjoying the process anymore. Even when I showed up at competitions, I didn't have that same buzz because I just wasn't enjoying the process. And it also in 2020 was a bit of a coping mechanism for me as well. I truly recognize that
yeah.
because I was going through some other stuff in other aspects of life. So that prep was kind of like, I remember actually saying to my coach when I hired, it was Cal Raystrick, you know, Cal,
Oh
don't
yeah,
you?
I think I worked with Cal around the same time. Yeah, it would have been. Yeah,
Yeah, so I remember starting with Callum being like, look, I'm giving everything to this. I just want to give it my best shot to get my pro card. He knew I was going through some stuff personally, and I just kind of wanted that to help me get through that period of my life as well. So once that season was over, I was like, right, okay, I've used that as a coping mechanism now. This is no longer in line with like the way that I want to live my life. It's coming with a lot of negative consequences from a health perspective. I was injured. Um, I also had no periods. I felt
that's
rubbish.
like so
So
many things to compound on top of posing every day, training, getting your meals,
yeah.
and then I assume also running your business as well.
Yeah, and I was also waking up feeling anxious every day. I just felt very out of alignment,
Yeah,
very unhealthy, and I was like, this is not the life that I want to live long term. And so I knew that that had to be my last season. So I kind of knew that was going to be my last season as I was going through it. And then when I took a step back, it confirmed that for me because I was just enjoying life outside of bodybuilding so much that I was like, this is definitely the right decision.
yeah. Sometimes you have to take a decent step away from something to go, holy shit, I actually am not really enjoying that based off how much I'm enjoying this other thing. Which kind of leads well into obviously now the goal is more like performance and that type of like more holistic goal. Do you call yourself a hybrid athlete? Some people really like the term, some people fucking hate it, which I find really interesting.
I don't think I would call myself a hybrid athlete, no, because the part of the reason why I wouldn't is because I don't identify with like competing in a particular sport or doing marathons or whatever it is. And I'm so, whatever goals I do set, it's not because I want to be an elite athlete. Like, it's not because I want to win. It's just because actually I enjoy doing those things and it's social and it's fun and
Yeah,
it's a way to, it's just a little nice little goal to aim for. It gives your training meaning, it gives you training structure, but it's not the be how I perform on that day is not the be all and end all, if that makes sense.
yeah, it's funny. I talk about this with quite a few of my friends who've like been training for like 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. and they trained ironically like how hybrid athletes train now, which is basically like strength and conditioning with a little bit of like running and other stuff on top of that. And now it's always become like its own bubble where at the end of the day it was just what training was before bodybuilding became as popular as it is. Which is for me, it's funny to just see the pendulum go the complete other way. Because I was the same. I did like a little bit of bodybuilding, but I also did a bit of sport. I hate it now, but I did a little bit of running. I did a bit of sprinting. I did like just the powerlifting as well, and like added the bodybuilding stuff on top of it. Whereas now that's actually like it's called a thing. Whereas in my mind, it was just I just like going to the gym because these are
Yeah.
the things that I enjoy. Let me do the things I enjoy without giving me a label. So that coming full circle has been really interesting. So for training wise, do you have any goals at the moment, or is it just kind of just to try and get better at most things across the board?
Yeah, it's kind of like you just said, I train because I want to be fit and healthy, be strong, and also feel good in my own skin. So it's not like that's why I don't class myself as a hybrid athlete
Yeah.
as well. It's just like I just want to be good across the board. But I'm doing a 10K not this weekend, the weekend after.
Okay.
But again, it's a very last minute entry. I think I entered last week and it's purely because my running's going really well at the moment. Like I feel good
Yeah.
and it'll be a fun day. We've got some friends doing it as well. So again, it's just another opportunity to kind of celebrate what I'm capable of, to push myself a little bit more because you always push yourself more when you're surrounded by other people doing the same thing and on race conditions.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's kind of it's way more relaxed than bodybuilding. Whereas like bodybuilding, you book you got right. I'm going to compete in this season. Here are the 4 to 7 shows potentially however it is I'm going to do. We plan the travel, the tanning, and all that. Whereas it's quite nice to just go, oh, running's going well. Oh, it's a 10K, just down the road. Like a few of my mates are doing it. Let's just jump in and just program for it on the day,
yeah.
see what happens. I can imagine it's a lot better. And like you mentioned, obviously, like the anxiety of waking up and having to be so regimented, it's probably quite nice to just go the complete other end of the spectrum and just go, I'm just going to train and then we'll take feedback, see what happens, and then that can be
Yeah.
information for the next training block.
100%. And it's just with bodybuilding, as you know, Josh, it's so every little variable in your life ends up being monitored when you have extreme goals in bodybuilding. Whereas with, I want to get fitter, I want to be better at running, I can still go out for meals with friends and family. I can still go and kind of do my weight training as well as running. I don't have to stick to one training modality. That comes with enjoyment. And there's so much more room for life in those goals. So I just find it so much nicer. Whereas for a bodybuilding competition, obviously you have to be absolutely peeled when you step on
Oh
stage.
God, yeah, yeah.
You can't get peeled in a few weeks. Whereas, if like you said, if my training's going well, my running's going well, and I want to jump into a race, you can do that. So I like that how it's much more kind of compatible with life.
Honestly, like it's like I talk about bodybuilding a lot, and I actually say to people like when I was like in the depths of my bodybuilding like phase, I wasn't even like pushing as hard as like most natural bodybuilders do in competing anyway, and I didn't even enjoy that. So I can imagine that if you get to the stage where you are going for a competition and there is like a high amount of pressure, and there's even that like little like doubt in your mind, like doubt is like it's like a weed, you don't need to water it to grow. Like if you don't like it a bit, and you're having to be in an extreme deficit do 15,000 steps a day plus 45, 60 minutes cardio every 2 to 3 days. Like it's so easy to have that in the back of your mind of like, do I really want to do this? Is this really what I enjoy? Because I did a phase with it was with Cal actually, which is some of the best like dieting I've done, where got very lean, went to a PCA show, and we were like, oh, we could do a show. I was having a back and forth, and then I just saw everyone step on stage, and I went, nah, it's not going to happen. There's just no way in hell. Because you do just need to be like every variable has to be accounted for. Whereas I think a lot of the reason why like the performance or hybrid, whatever you want to call it, goals are so popular now is just because you can be more relaxed with it, but there's so much more variety within programming. It isn't just right, okay, judges say we need more, glute shelf or more top line this off season, we're just going to hammer that, and it's like everything else takes a bit of a back seat, and we just really push incline pressing and deadlifts, and that's it. Whereas in this, it's okay, I kind of want to get a really strong overhead press, but also I want to beat my 5K time. And it's a little
Yeah.
bit more. I can imagine your programming there's a lot more variety and interest with what you can do from block to block, as opposed to just more volume on this body part, different
Yeah.
exercise on this body part, rinse and repeat.
100%. And I was competing in the bikini category, and that was quite restrictive from a training perspective towards the end as well, because you had to be so particular with how you developed your physique. So one of the things I had to do was remove deadlifts. I really enjoy deadlifts,
Mhm.
but I could no longer deadlift because I have quite a bit of muscle in my lower back.
Mhm.
And it was getting to the point where because of my body fat distribution, when I got lean, my lower back was too lean, and you could see all of my erectors and like all of the muscle in that area, which is not what they want to see in bikini. They don't want to see that level of lean.
Mhm.
So if you've got body parts like that where you are carrying quite a bit of muscle and it's not where they want that muscle, and look too lean as a result of that, you then have to cater your training for that. And like I said, I had to stop deadlifting so that I didn't develop any more muscle through my erectors, which made training less enjoyable for me and other little things like that as well.
Yeah, you are under a complete microscope. When you were like doing the transition from like the bodybuilding to the more like performance stuff, was that something that felt like really natural, or did you kind of struggle with it? Because obviously you train a certain way your entire life, and you have a, whether it is like the beat the logbook mindset, or like, work to train a certain muscle, or you're working on certain variables within a training session, versus right, we're going to focus on movements, energy systems, like building certain qualities. Was that something that took quite a bit of a learning period, or was it quite easy to transition into that?
It was quite easy mentally because I enjoyed it so much, but physically there were things that I had to like wrap my head around, and it took me time for my body to physically adapt to. So an example was when I actually initially stopped bodybuilding, I dabbled in CrossFit for a while. So I
Excellent.
went to a CrossFit box
Yeah.
and started training there. And it was mad because I couldn't even hold the bar in front rack position for any of my Olympic lifts for my, front squat and for my overhead press. So it's like when I did an overhead press, I was like pressing from my ear height rather than from front rack because I just couldn't get into that position because I'd been pressing in a restricted range for so long. So things like that, it took me a while to obviously learn and to be able to do physically. And also in bodybuilding, as you know, Josh, you do a lot of really low intensity cardio. So it might be just walking on a treadmill. You don't do any watts or, high intensity work. So again, it took a while for me to get used to that physically. I was absolutely battered at first, especially doing CrossFit when there's minimal structure.
Oh God, yeah, yeah,
And that was one of the reasons I eventually transitioned away from CrossFit because although I loved it to some extent and it was at the time the right thing for me to do because it got me mentally engaged in something else and focused on my performance as opposed to what my body looked like, which really helped me in a lot of ways from a body image perspective and just from an appreciation perspective, and for shifting my focus to what my body can do rather than what it looked like. Like it was so good for me. But physically, I was battered and I missed then having structure to my training and being able to monitor my progression a little bit more effectively. So that's why I kind of moved away from CrossFit. But I still included some of what I learned from CrossFit, some of the movements that I enjoyed as I transitioned away from it. Just started training in a more structured manner. I hired a strength and conditioning coach,
yeah.
and that's when I started dabbling in high rocks and did the odd half marathon and things like that. So yeah, I think one of the best things I did during that transition was try different training styles and
Yeah.
started moving my body in different ways. I also did pole dancing and yoga through different times just to experiment with different ways of moving my body, and that was great for me.
I do like how you went from one absolute extreme to another, from, rigid bodybuilding to the most varied exercise sports in existence in
Yeah,
a very short period of time, which is like, it's funny. I never post about this, but I think my first introduction to CrossFit was doing a CrossFit competition for Men's Health, like 5 days after a photo shoot. And it was fucking terrible. But the exact story you give of not being able to lock out the overhead press, I was exactly the same. I pressed, not get my head through, getting no reps, and I'm like, what the fuck is so yeah, it's quite fun going and just trying something completely new, like you said, whether it is, yoga or pole or any other kind of sport, just because you get you get that exposure from a training perspective, but also it's like you have to think very, very differently about how you're moving,
yeah.
which I think is it's quite nice for a lot of people. It's quite nice to not go in and like this is even with what I think. It's quite nice to not go in and be like, right, like how am I loading the prime piece of kit here? What muscle am I contracting? It's more of like, all right, you just need to pick something up and like take it to the other end of the room as quickly as
Yeah.
you can with whether that is strongman or CrossFit or any of the variation. So yeah, I think the variety within training is something that's really, really nice to see nowadays.
100%. And it was also good for me mentally as well, because when you're learning a new skill, like Olympic lifts, for example, you can't be thinking about other things whilst you're doing that. So that the fact it was so immersive was really good for me because I completely switched off during those sessions from everything else in life, whether that be work, personal life stresses, whatever it was, rather than bodybuilding, where I'd been doing it for so long that those movements were second nature to me. And I was just going through the motions and had a lot of time to like think about work, pick up my phone between sets, that type of thing. So it was really good for me from that perspective as well.
Your training almost becomes a hobby again, as opposed to like a chore that is just a part of your life, which I do find that does sometimes happen, especially when you're a PT and your life is the gym really, and then you have to go in and train, and it's right. I'm going to do the same things I'm probably telling my clients. Whereas if you're doing something completely different, it's quite nice to just to basically switch your brain off, but also have it focus on a completely different task that's going to actually keep you engaged. And like I know you do like something like the Olympic lifting. Like again, if you're slightly like out of focus on Olympic lift, like you'll know the second the bar goes over your head. Like you'll get spit out your snatch pretty much instantly. So I think it's a lot more interesting than just getting into a Swift machine and just going right, is it lined up, press, repeat. So yeah, that variety is quite good. With nutrition, because obviously we know that building is very restricted when it comes to nutrition. Deep into a deficit, you become very deficient on nutrients and just food in general. How did that kind of, because I know obviously eating disorder is something you talk about a lot and that kind of issues with food. How did that kind of like shift as you went into performance goals?
So initially, what I will say, and I said this to someone the other day who was asking me about it, is during my time in bodybuilding, I've always been relatively health conscious. So although you have to sacrifice your health in bodybuilding, I did what I could to protect it during that time.
Yeah.
So in my improvement seasons, I would always take little periods of time away from tracking and that type of thing. So when it came to actually moving away from bodybuilding, I'd already had that exposure to not having control over every little calorie that I was consuming. I was used to taking time away from that in my improvement seasons. And so I quite quickly transitioned to moving away from tracking after my time competing. What Cal was also very good at, and you'll probably know this, Josh, is in the run up to a show, I would always get stage lean beforehand
Oh
and
yeah.
then start to bring food up into the show. So that put me in a better mindset around food than I would have been if I'd have just dieted all the way into the show. Because as soon as my show finished, my food was already high, and I wasn't then scared about, oh, what's going to happen if I start to eat more food. So that put me in quite a good position to like, get into CrossFit and already be quite well fueled and that type of thing, rather than being in this state of restriction. So that really helped me. And I guess yeah, just very quickly kind of moved away from tracking. I was still very much eating in a similar structure to what I would have been in bodybuilding initially, having four servings of protein throughout the day, having three main meals and a snack. Like I didn't throw the kitchen sink at my diet, but I did reintroduced quite a bit of flexibility quite soon in terms of eating out and that kind of thing. But I didn't have any major issues with food post show or in that transition. And then I wouldn't say I particularly changed my diet massively when I initially got into CrossFit, but what I did start to do once I entered competitions and things like that is just really prioritize carbohydrate around the training window and that kind of thing. Um, and then when I started training for the half marathon, that's when I started to pay a bit more attention to like utilizing electrolytes, having intra-run fuel, that type of thing, and got into the nitty-gritty with that. But yeah, it wasn't, I don't think food was too hard of a transition for me. And I I did my performance nutrition diploma years ago. So I had a good knowledge base on what to do. It's not like I just did bodybuilding and that's all I ever knew. I did a lot of work. We had a lot of case studies on endurance athletes in that nutrition diploma. So I had that knowledge in the back of my mind and I kind of knew what to do with myself when I was training hard and when I was training for performance. And then I guess now the the main change is that I'm just so much more relaxed around food as well as making sure that I have enough fuel around the training window and that kind of thing, but I don't track my food anymore.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that kind of concept that you had like a different sport and nutrition background before bodybuilding. So there was probably already like a really good base, like knowledge and kind of experience there. Whereas like anecdotally, I found a lot of people have not really done that. They've gone straight into bodybuilding. All they know is bodybuilding. And like I don't really have an issue with bodybuilding per se. It's more of they don't realize that there's other things you can do around it. And the one thing I found is we're doing a bit more of the physio stuff as people transitioning from doing almost exactly what you've done, which is they've gone bodybuilding, not for me. Not really a fan of like burying myself in my physique. I quite like running. I quite like, doing a couple of barbell movements that aren't optimal, wherever it is. And they almost go through like this identity crisis where they go, this is all I've ever known. How do I now integrate it into like my kind of new regime? And a lot of it is like being managed psychologically and just saying, actually, you can retain muscle really, really well doing like
Yeah.
performance goals. I think people think that with the second you start running, you're going to lose muscle tissue. It's actually not really. You might lose like maximal strength, maybe if your program's not that good, but you'd be quite surprised how like much of your like physique you can retain when it comes to doing these, and still build as well, because you'll probably be your gaining phases, if you want to call them that, are probably going to be like far more well nourished. You're probably going to have like much better cardiovascular output, which is great for training, which I think people forget. So I think it's interesting you say that because I think a lot of people are going through that phase where they're not realizing that bodybuilding, ironically, is not the only way to train, and there are so many other variables that you can include into your training.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of people do struggle with the nutrition element when they do move from bodybuilding to performance because they don't realize how demanding training for, say, a marathon is and how much energy it needs to fuel that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, as you'll know, Josh, will get into endurance sports sometimes with the goal, even if it's subconsciously, of hoping that they'll lose fat throughout, when actually the opposite can often happen because you have to fuel really well to be able to perform and handle the stress that that sport puts in your body or, the fitness event puts in your body. So I think that's from working with clients who've been through that transition, that's probably one of the biggest struggles is getting your head around one, eating so many carbs, and two, understanding quite how much fuel you need to be able to perform well and maintain good health when you're doing these fitness events or races.
Yeah, like that's the thing that I've been pushing a lot with more of the clients I run for, just when I run their programming, is like we'll even though we don't kind of cover like detailed nutrition work, it's more like, right, are we seeing like if the scale weight is repeatedly going down, it's like, right, okay, that's instantly a red flag, especially when we're trying to push like a marathon time or we're trying to push training. The one thing this is from my experience. Do you find that people are very not bad, but it's very easy to try to cram a lot of work within 1 week because now you have, especially with us running, because we have like at least 2 runs a week we're probably doing. We've got 3 to 4 weightlifting sessions a week depending on how much time we have. Do you find that people are not bad at organizing their time, but there's a lot of like pressure to try and kind of find this optimized split, whereas most people actually need to do less? Because this is what I would say I found mostly.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I completely agree. And a lot of the time it's because what they'll do is say someone's coming from a bodybuilding background and they want to start to run,
Mhm.
they'll have their same bodybuilding split they were following before, but they'll just lump a load of running on
Top of
top of
it.
that and it's too much at once. So what they need to do instead is meet themselves in the middle a little bit, and as you'll know, like pull back on the bodybuilding training that they're doing to allow for that running volume initially. And then they might be able to add back in another session further down the line, but they need to give their body chance to adapt to that without just like lumping a load of running on top of what they're already doing. And then potentially considering adapting, rep ranges a little bit if they're adding a load of running in and doing maybe adding some plyos in to support their running, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think the like plyometrics and just general. I classify it as general strength training, but like you also know you can go very in depth with some of the stuff that you can do from like the biomechanics aspects. I think people forget that just training bodybuilding for the sake of building muscles. Not that it doesn't have much correlation to running, because you can still get good strength adaptations, but there's so many like qualities that you need for running that just are not covered with like general bodybuilding training. That is, you do have to kind of transition out of that. And like the phrase you use is that, which is something I've said a lot, is people just go, all right, I'm going to start running, and they've got their upper lower split, and they go, right, I'm going to stick 2 runs on top of this, and it's just you've
Yeah.
added like like 50% more sessions if you want to equate them, but then also like probably not tracking mileage or kilometer pace very well, probably just not very good at like periodizing their runs. The amount of times I've seen someone do, right, I'll do a 2K run this week, right, I'll do a 3K run next week, that's 50% increase that you've never run before. It's actually quite a lot if you think about it. So it's trying to get people to be a bit more intelligent with programming. And I think with bodybuilding, and again, not to try and shit on bodybuilding, it's quite easy to just be like, right, next week we did this. Sorry, this week we did this. Next week we do more. And like it's not always exactly the same when it comes to working towards these performance goals. You have to be very, very intelligent. And like some phases, some things are going to be maintained. Next phase you progress it. So you have to kind of have a little bit more forethought with your programming.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just also, I think, being flexible with your program. So, if for example, I don't know, you've got a really high stress week where you've got a lot going on professionally, you're not sleeping well, you're feeling anxious, but you come around to a higher intensity, I don't know, sprint session or interval session, it's being able to adapt on those days. And obviously, if you've got the support of a coach, it's great because you can just message them and be like, look, this is how I'm feeling. Like, what should I do?
Help, help.
Help me. And they can tell you what to do. But like, you have to be adaptable when you're trying to balance lots of different training goals. And if stress is high and you come to a high intensity day, it's allowing yourself to pull back a little bit and go for a low intensity run instead to enable your body to recover from the stress that you're placing on it.
Yeah, this is the majority of what I talk to with a lot of the people that come to me. Because usually when they come to me, they are unfortunately probably at the not at their worst, but they probably have an injury. It's been harder to maintain like higher level runs because of that. And it's I have to be the bad guy and like pull them back and say, hey, this is clearly the body's taking too much stress. We need to find whatever it can deal with. And then we titrate it up, which I'm sure you probably had before. It's very frustrating when you're used to doing 2, 3 runs a week and just flying, and then you do 1 5K and it's like, oh, my knee is not fucking having it today. So it is, but this is also why it comes back to you need to be very diligent with your programming. And the thing I do say to people is like you can achieve really good goals within performance training. It's just you have to be like very diligent about not getting injured, but like knowing when things are ramping up and you are getting stressed. Like, okay, this is not the week where we PB. Maybe in a
Yeah.
week's time where we feel a bit better, but it's work stress or like anything to do with personal life or just sleep has been terrible this week. This is not the week we go for the PB 10K. This is the week we do maybe a little bit of like a maintenance run, and then next week we just push it back. Like there is always the next week. Whereas I feel like maybe with bodybuilding, it's like, show date is coming up. We need to keep progressing. We need to have these goals. We need to see that scale weight move. Like there's kind of the kind of bury yourself as much as you can until you get that next progression. Whereas in the same way performance goals have variety, they've also got probably a little bit more leniency where you can actually like kind of step back and go, actually, I don't need to like have that kind of consistent pressure. Which I can imagine probably feels a lot better than when you're waking up on prep and you're like, fuck, I need to hit all these targets today.
100%. And it's also like my, when I was bodybuilding, it was kind of my, it was tied into my career. It was also, it wasn't just something I was doing for enjoyment. It was almost my purpose. It was,
Was it like very much like your identity as well? Did you find that?
yeah, it was my entire identity. It was, I was waking up every day thinking, I want to be better next time I step on stage. Whereas now, although I still have goals within my training, they are not, my identity isn't wrapped up in them. If I got to a point where I wasn't enjoying running anymore, cool, I just wouldn't run, and it wouldn't be this massive process to re-find myself or refine my identity. It would just be cool, I'm not running anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas bodybuilding was like my entire sense of self. So
Yeah.
it's just a much different scenario as well. And there's a lot less pressure that comes with that. And that reduction in pressure allows me to one, enjoy my training more, but also be flexible with it. So if I fall out of love with a certain element of it, cool, I just won't do that anymore and I'll move directions. That doesn't impact me.
Yeah, I use this analogy with quite a lot of things, which is like a lot of people go through that kind of Dunning-Kruger cycle where you start off training and you just enjoy everything because you just enjoy training. And then you find one thing, you go to that kind of peak where you're like, right, everything has to be optimized. I have to do everything perfectly. I need to adhere to this target. And then you kind of fall off and you end up back where you were before, just with more experience going, kind of just like training. And I
Yeah.
feel like everyone is just going through that cycle now where probably if I had to put like an age range on like early 20s to like late 20s, like you probably hit the peak in your mid 20s and you get to your late 20s or 30s and you go, actually, I quite like just running and like or playing five-a-side with my mates and then just going and training arms afterwards. And I feel quite good doing that. And I still have a good physique doing that. And I don't need to do it because someone else says I need to do, this certain workout or this certain system. So, and I think with fitness, I don't know what you think about this, but I think peace of mind is such an underrated thing of just going, I like going to the gym, I like doing the things I want to do, and it gives me the thing that I need. If you are going for a very high-end sport and trying to compete, then absolutely fine. You do have to push yourself. But for the most part, which I assume the most of the clients that you and I train, they probably don't need that amount of pressure.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. And sometimes that reduction in pressure actually allows people to perform better.
Absolutely. 100%.
So
Did you,
it's,
sorry, go.
yeah, it's like sometimes counterproductive to heap that pressure on yourself anyway.
Absolutely. So did you when you so obviously through your coaching career, did like your kind of I don't want to say niche, but like your clientele kind of shift as a result of that as well? Because I imagine you probably worked with a lot of people who identified with like your bodybuilding lifestyle, and then as you moved away from that, you probably found people who identified with moving away from it as well, and the things you practice now more compared to like when you were competing.
Yeah, 100%. So when I was competing, I think a couple of years in, I started getting inquiries from other people that wanted to step on stage.
Mhm.
And so I kind of again fell into coaching bodybuilders. They were mostly early day bodybuilders, a lot of
Okay.
first timers. There were actually, to be fair, after a couple of years of coaching bodybuilders, I had some really good athletes. Like they
Okay.
had so much potential and they were doing really well at shows. So they were amazing to coach. I loved every single one of them. But then when I moved away from bodybuilding myself and I almost felt my values shift in terms of I really cared about my own health, but I also cared about my clients' health. It just started to sit weirdly with me that I was pushing people through this process that there was no two ways about it. It would have a negative impact on their health in some way, whether it was their body image or relationship with food or their menstrual cycle function, physical health.
Yeah.
It was gonna harm them in some way, and it just didn't sit well with me anymore. So I got to the point where I think 2021 was my last season coaching bodybuilders. So the year after I moved away from it. And I just said to them all, look, after this season, I'm not going to be coaching people to step on stage anymore. It's completely fine if you want to go elsewhere. I would recommend these people, give them a list of coaches. And I sent them all an individual video. I felt so awful, but I was like, I just have to do this because I'm waking up feeling like this is not for me every day. And I knew that I therefore wouldn't be the right coach for them anyway.
You know what I think is what's coming when it comes to all the situations they're going to be in. So I can imagine like
Yeah,
if you've seen, I don't say the worst of it. If you've seen like the bad parts of it, you're like, I know exactly what they're going to be thinking. And then it is, I do think there's a part of coaching where there is like I do think coaching should have like a do no harm clause, the same way that we do in like medical professions, sorry. But yeah, and it's hard because you're accepting. I know you're going to wake up and you probably will lose your period. You probably are going to have like severe issues with food afterwards, even if we do everything right people can
yeah.
still end up like not in a great position after bodybuilding. So it's tough.
100%. Yeah. And that's where I had to step away from it. But funnily enough, some of the clients that I was coaching actually, with that move from me, decided not to compete anymore. They were like, actually, I don't
Okay.
want to compete anymore. I still want you to coach me. So that was an interesting experience and was, I guess, quite refreshing in a way because it just made me feel like, oh, these people like are really benefiting from the coaching process and maybe that decision has made them question whether they're doing it for the right reasons, which is a good thing. You should question that. It's not forcing them to make a decision, but it's getting them to get curious. And so some of them stayed on. I did obviously lose a lot of clients, but I knew that it was the right decision for me. And then that transition away from that reflected who started to approach me from then as well, which was I do support a lot of people who have been in the bodybuilding industry in the past and want to transition away from it and want to actually achieve their goals, but whilst improving the health and quality of life rather than sacrificing those things.
It
Um,
yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah, and that just people who kind of, I guess, share similar values.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting with especially with personal training when obviously a lot of the businesses through social media showing your life is like I don't really talk about that marketing stuff, but it's like people buy way more into you than they do into the sport that you do, and I think
Yeah,
it's quite nice to see. Actually, like I get why they don't like this. I also don't like it for this reason. There are probably reasons I still do like it, but I'm kind of leaning the same way. So it's quite nice that there was also that shift that clients had where they went actually like. I've been thinking the same thing. And again, like if you hadn't said that, they probably never would have mentioned it to you.
yeah,
They probably would have been like, yeah, let's do the competitive season, even though they're kind of like, oh, I don't want to have to die. I'm sick of missing like meals with my boyfriend or my family and all this. So like, I think it is really important as a coach just to be like, I don't want to say authentic, but just honest about what you think of things. Even if you are doing them, like you can still be a bodybuilder and say, hey, this is wrecking me, but this is what I also like doing at the same time, and then just having that clarity with your clients.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So with your transition from business now, from what I've seen you doing back to one-to-one coaching, is that correct?
I've done a bit, yeah. It
Yeah.
complicated because my boyfriend lives in Leeds and I was in Manchester last year, moved back to Sheffield whilst I was between Leeds and Sheffield. And so I started the one-to-one personal training in Sheffield, but now I'm spending most of my time in Leeds. So I do travel back once a week for it at the moment, but I'm not I would, I was saying to Rob earlier, like I wish that I could bring that gym over
That
here.
space, just yeah. I've had
Yeah,
this with a
because
lot
it's
of places. Yeah.
perfect. Like it's
Yeah.
just ideal. It's a private facility. It has everything that I need. It looks good. And I don't have to pay a monthly rent. I just pay per session, which is ideal for me because I don't want a PT full time, but I would love to do some on the side. It makes me really happy to see people in person. I think it's really impactful, especially for people who are relatively new to the gym. And even, to be honest, even experienced coaches who just want to refine things, it can be great for them too. But yeah, I wish I could do more of it with me being in this bit of like an in-between phase where I'm traveling between cities. It's probably not going to be possible for me to do more of it right now, but I think I would love to at some point in the future because it's just so good.
It's been really interesting because I've had this exact conversation with quite a lot of other coaches who've been in the industry for similar amount of time, like around roughly like 10-year turnover, where you start one-to-one, you go online, and then a lot of them are actually going, I actually really miss like the one-to-one. And like not even just one-to-one, also like the community aspects of it. Like you said, like
Yeah.
you learn things very quickly when you're a one-to-one coach doing things with in person. You can have a lot more impact. It baffles me that Manchester doesn't have a very similar setup. There's no gym that does a pay by session here.
I
Where
know.
London has loads. I know Liverpool has them. So yeah, I'm sat like waiting for one of those to pop up at the moment.
That's why I never did it in Manchester
Yeah, I don't
because
blame you.
when I was living there, I would have loved to have done a bit of PT on the side, but there was, gym rent is not cheap. And if
Gym rent's
you're,
insane nowadays.
yeah, and if you're wanting to do a day or two a week, it's not worth it. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. And I think more gyms should offer that because they'd get more experienced coaches in there. And I don't understand how it's not beneficial for them to do it. But anyway.
Yeah, so this is an interesting discussion. So like when you were in Pure Gym, do you remember what your rent was, or like what your kind of setup was?
Yes, it started it. So I started on hours where I was doing
Yeah,
15 hours a week and I was self-employed at Pure Gym
yeah,
at the time. I think they employ people now, but yeah, self-employed. And I started on 15 hours, was doing the classes and everything and didn't pay anything outside of that, just PT'd
that's a
my
good setup. That's a good
client.
setup. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I moved on to rent, which I believe started at 400 a month. And then I think it went up to 500
Okay.
when I left, but then I went to work at Iron Athlete slash Ultraflex.
Okay. Right. So when I was in when I PT'd in it's a Pure Gym now, but at the time it was called Soho Gyms. My rent setup was £630 a month, which is Camden, London. So it's like you could charge a bit more with 10 hours a week. Full rent was 840, but there are Pure Gyms in Manchester who you do hours and your rent is like 650.
Yeah, it's
which
way
is
more now. So
mad.
when it was 400, it must have been 2016, I think. So it'll be a lot more at that gym now. Um, but I know the rent's extortionate now these
Yeah.
days.
Being a one-to-one PT is it's very different now, I think, compared to like when you and I first started, compared to, and I think it's because the industry was nowhere near as big. And like I say this all the time, like when like 2015, 2016, you start out as a one-to-one PT. I'm trying to think like the best you could probably do is have your own space, or like unless you're like, Nick Mitchell with owning multiple gyms across the world. But like now it's, it's Dubai, online coach, and all the things that we kind of see on social media. So I think because there's more potential, people think, oh, we can charge more rent now because there's more earning. But then it's the circumstances to get there is very, very different than what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. And you can make it work as a full-time PT, but like I said, I think the unfortunate thing is that it cuts off potentially more experienced coaches who have a blend of online and in-person and want to do some in-person work. It would raise the standards of the gym
It would.
and it'd be great for both the coaches and the gym. So I don't understand why they don't do that. And it also makes it really hard for new coaches coming up to pay like £1,000 a month
It's a lot of cash
build a
just to
business
chuck
from
on top of everything
scratch.
else. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then to go in with no clients. And if you bring
Yeah.
clients in, I kind of get that. But yeah, it's because I've been chatting to a lot of the coaches in similar situations. It's been really interesting to see how different that is compared to like 10 years ago and then even then, like I would argue, Manchester, sessions probably won't get away with charging more than £45 an hour in a pure gym. And you compare that to near £700 rent. It's a lot of sessions you have to do to make up your rent and then some.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. It's
yeah,
difficult.
yeah. It's the industry's in a very interesting spot right now, which is kind of fun. So predominantly we are online. Yeah, not yeah.
Yeah, we're predominantly online. I'd love in an ideal world to do like a day or two in person because I am a people person. Like there's no two ways about that. But I what I am doing is I'm doing like a lifting workshop at the end of March in
Okay.
Sheffield, and I'm going to try and do more of that type of thing to get that in-person interaction and to help people in person without having to, commit to doing it full time with me being between cities and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I say this to a lot of online coaches where I say like there's literally nothing against you going to see your clients and train with them. Like you have the most opportunity to do that. You are self-employed and you sit behind a laptop. You can do a full day's work and still go see your client and train. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing against that. So yeah, I think like the community aspect of online coaching is underused, and especially I think when you deal with clients like yourself where they've got maybe where we have got like a poor history of training or they've got more intricate goals, like having that one-to-one like talk, just actually being in front of someone it's so undervalued nowadays.
It really is. And it's like my client who I do train in Sheffield. I love coaching her and
Yeah.
like I've been coaching her since December and I have such a good relationship with her like as a client and she said to me this morning, she was like, I don't know where I'd be if it wasn't for our sessions
Yeah.
together. And the impact you can have on someone in person is just like insane in such a short period of time. Whereas you can still have that impact online, yes, but it probably takes a little bit longer to establish that kind of relationship. And sometimes people just need that in-person support.
Yeah, in the digital age where like, everything is on this, like it is, I think it is undervalued how much you can get out of 1 hour with another person, especially if it is actually your coach who's like, right, we're going to go through these exercises that you just don't seem to get online because on trying to do training feedback online is very, very difficult. Or right, we're going to sit down and talk through like meal structure or your routine or all these things that you can do a lot more efficiently than you can do over Zoom. And like Zoom is still great, but like having that kind of being there with someone is just completely different.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Excellent. Do we have any other future plans for training or business, or are we just kind of like seeing what's happening now? Yeah.
And just kind of going with the flow, to be honest.
Yeah,
I
that's
would
fine.
like to do, I think I'd like to do another half marathon at some point, but I'm not putting pressure on myself with it because I did one the back end of last year, I think it was November, and I was really sick because I was coming down with something before the half marathon. I ran the half marathon and then I have never been as ill in my entire life. Like my
That's
lips went
terrible.
blue straight afterwards.
Oh,
It
that's
was
bad.
really not a good experience. I was having these episodes where I'd like sweat and overheat, and then sh shiver and then sweat and overheat. It was just horrible.
Oh,
I've
right.
never been so sick, so I have a bit of like, okay, I'm not ready to experience that. I know I won't get sick again in the same way that I did, but I'm just not ready to go through another half marathon when the second half of it just felt like a constant battle.
Been
Every single
traumatized.
step was so hard. So I'm just not ready to do it again right yet, but I want to do it at some point and hit
Okay.
another half marathon PB. We've got the 10K next weekend, and then I don't know, who knows? We'll see. I enjoy my training. I enjoy getting fitter and stronger, feeling healthy, feeling good in my own skin. I train also because it benefits me mentally and makes me more productive. And so I'm happy doing that for myself, even without a goal. And then if there are competitions that I want to enter along the way, then I'll enter them, but there's no pressure on them.
I mean, this is literally why I wanted to have this talk because it's something I'm finding a lot now with training, and it's something that I very much resonate with, which is just you can just you find the things which you know work that feel really good that you can progress, and you rinse and repeat them, and then if it becomes something you don't resonate with anymore, change it and find what works. Like, it doesn't need to be you don't need to belong to a camp at the end of the day.
100%, yeah, and I love that.
All right, awesome, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me, Josh.
All right.